We are on record today for review as well as permanency planning hearing. May I have the names of our participants, please?
Lee Heights, lawyer, guardian, ad litem.
Nastasia Thomas, counsel for the department.
Kristen Smith, foster care worker, Catholic Charities.
Michael Brooks, I represent the father, Ruben Garcia.
Okay, Mr. Garcia, I've requested for you to unmute for the time being to allow you to introduce yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Would you give us your name for the record?
Yes. My full name is Ruben Fernando Zavala Garcia.
Thank you. We do have quite a bit of noise coming from that area, so I'm going to have to mute you. So we'll have to just invite you to unmute when it's time. Right. Mr. McFarland?
Michael McFarland representing mother, Caitlin Smith. I do not see her here, but at least on my calendar for my office, I showed that this was scheduled in front of the referee field. So I wonder if the court might check to see if the notice went out that way to my client.
It simply says that the next hearing will be April 2nd at 1:30 p.m. It does not indicate that it would be in front of the referee or the court.
Oh, so it didn't give any Zoom information.
Correct.
I'm fine then, Your Honor.
Good.
Since she's not out in the hall, I have checked.
I do not have anyone else in the waiting room either. If someone shows up, I'll be sure to let them in and find out. All right. Ms. Hess?
Thank you, Your Honor. I was able to visit with the child in person. He has had a rough reporting period in the sense that he has autism and he is really aware of the schedule. So when it's Wednesday or whichever day is his mom's visit, he's very aware, and mom has not been showing up. So the team agreed that they would take that off the calendar, and he noticed that it wasn't on the calendar, but in time he was able to not miss those visits as much. He is making so much progress. When we began our case, he was nonverbal. And in addition to being able to say Lee, which is kind of easy, he can say a lot of things. And he looks to his caregiver, his placement, for support in translating what he says. He seems happier than usual, I would say. The placement is steady. It's he has 4 hours of therapy in his home at least once a week. 4 times a week. 4 times a week. It's amazing. And then we see, I was in a family team meeting that's reported here, and mom's behavior, I find it consistent with these progress notes from the different providers for her pressured speech. I find all this to be my experience with mom. Intense flight of speech, one provider indicated. And it gets really just confusing because we want to talk about progress in the case, but everything gets obfuscated and confusing. So she stopped visiting after the visits were pulled back and made into supervised visits. And it just further damages the bond between the mother and the child. So I see that the agency wants a change in the goal, and I don't dispute that. I think that this child is ready for permanence, and the placement that he has is able to provide that. Thank you.
Ms. Thomas?
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Be sworn in, please.
Ms. Smith, come on up to our witness stand.
Good afternoon. Ms. Smith, you have prepared, or you have submitted a court report for today's hearing, and on the list of exhibits, it indicates that in addition to report, there is a case service plan, screenshots, email document regarding housing verification for Ms. Caitlin Smith. Then there are drug screens for Ms. Caitlin Smith, family team meeting notes, a safety plan regarding unsupervised parenting time, Center for Family Health Records regarding Ms. Caitlin Smith, and then a letter sent to Mr. Ruben Zavala Garcia, and then also text message screenshots going back and forth between you and Ms. Caitlin Smith. Is that accurate to the best of your recollection?
Yes, it is.
And have you submitted or circulated any other documents since you prepared this report?
No.
And are there any updates or modifications that need to be made to your report or any of the attached documents?
Just a few updates. Caitlin still hasn't visited with Mateo. She was offered a visit last week. I reached out to her. She just didn't respond at all. And then this morning I checked Forensic Fluid's website to see if she had went and screened yet, and she missed the screen on the 23rd as well as the 30th.
I'm going to go off script here to address the elephant in the room, so to speak. Last time we were here, things were going really well. We were talking about increasing parenting time, looking at mom's housing, making sure it's appropriate, all these things. Like, what happened?
Correct. So shortly after that last hearing, we got together and we created the safety plan, which I believe was previously submitted to the court within the 7 days after it was completed. But we created a safety plan essentially surrounding how to get to unsupervised visits, or essentially that they could be unsupervised, but because of her transportation issues and her license, we still needed somebody to kind of facilitate that. Once her housing was appropriate, we were going to have visits at the home. I visited the residence, I believe on February 15th or somewhere around that date. At the time, the house still needed a lot of work, but there weren't any immediate safety concerns that Mateo couldn't have been at the house. It was very cluttered, dirty. There's a lot of items in the home. So I told Caitlin that she needed to provide me with a copy of the lease. That way I could make sure that her housing was legal before Mateo, would come there. So she sent me a screenshot. That's what's attached to the court report. But at that time didn't provide me with a contact number to follow up and ask questions about the lease, or if I had any concerns. Mateo had, I believe, 1 day visit. He went to the home. The caregivers actually reported that he was gone for about 7 hours. When Caitlin returned him, they said that she was visibly exhausted, worn out. Mateo was very dirty. I don't know if they played outside. But I had asked Caitlin consistently for follow-up on pay stubs, for drug screens, everything really on her case service plan. She failed to do that. We had an FTM towards the end of the month, February, I believe. Maybe it was March. And at that FTM, she had a change in meds. There was some questions of why she changed the meds when we found out that, the meds weren't necessarily for ADHD, but bipolar. She argued that. So when I contacted her psychiatrist and kind of did a little more digging to get answers as to why the meds were changed, what should she be on, and to clarify that, I found out that she really wasn't attending any of her psychiatric appointments. Her psychiatrist actually has never met her. Only a couple appointments. She said that because of her inconsistency with taking meds and keeping appointments, she couldn't accurately diagnose her. Her psychiatrist did say that, yes, she prescribed her the different medication, which primarily is used to treat bipolar depression, but that she wasn't necessarily diagnosed with that, but it could help with Caitlin's ADHD behaviors as well. Caitlin refused, though, to take that, stating that she didn't have bipolar. So as the agencies, then I also found out that she was fired from her job in December. She didn't ever report that to me. That was part of the days that Mateo could visit. She said that she was working around her work schedule and that she's got Saturday and Sundays off, so they had to be visits on the weekends. But when I asked her to verify her employment, she wasn't able to do so. I contacted the general manager, and that's when I found out that she lost her job back in December. She never obtained the license. Essentially, I told her that there were a lot of concerns, mainly with her mental health, and for those reasons, until she was consistent on medication and consistent in her psychiatric appointments, that the visits were going to be pulled back to the office and supervised. And because of Mateo's ABA therapy on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, in school schedule, we went back to what we originally had, which was Wednesdays from 3:20 to 5:20, with him getting dropped off by the bus. Caitlin didn't like that her visits were supervised, felt that there was no reason that they should be. And since she has refused to come to visits or really engage with me at all, she's asked that any contact that it go through her attorney.
In all of that, what was the concerned risk of harm to the child?
Untreated mental health concerns, primarily. Also, with her drug screens, that became a really big concern. So I didn't want to have, I'd never like to have, you know, a parent duplicate services. So if she was screening through through Victory Clinic, as long as I could get those drug screens, I'm not going to make her screen, you know, through forensic fluids, because transportation is a huge deal for her. So she was giving me drug screens through Victory Clinic. She was giving them to me herself. She would take a picture of the printout and send it to me, which I thought was fine, until I had contacted Victory Clinic and was informed that clients actually shouldn't have their drug screens because they can be easily altered. And that Caitlin needed to sign the specific release through Victory Clinic and they would fax me directly. So I explained that to Caitlin. I said, you know, you can either sign the release and specify that I need those drug screens directly from Victory, or you need to screen through forensic fluids because I have full access to view all of those results. And she said that she would do so, but she hasn't. I haven't been able to get any screens from Victory Clinic. And this reporting period, the only screens that I have is the ones that she provided me, and that was for about 30 days between January and February 4th, I think was the last time that I received a screen.
I was looking at the Victory Clinic screenshot or thing, and it looks like the drugs are sort of on that top column, and then the dates kind of go in rows, and then there's X's in whatever is present. Is that an accurate reflection of what you recall from seeing those?
Yes, and the concern with that was that essentially I was informed that you could simply take white out the X, make a copy, and then send that as your clean screen. I don't have any proof or evidence that that was done in this case, but it has been done, and that's why I told Caitlin we can't accept those screens any longer.
And then as it relates to the housing, do you have any concerns about the letter that she provided you?
I do. So it says, you know, essentially it's addressed to whom this may concern, and then at the bottom it specifies me. There was no phone number provided on it. When I asked Caitlin for a number, she did later give it to me a couple weeks later. I called the number that she gave me, and that number wasn't in service. So other than that, that's the only verification of housing that I have.
And it doesn't look like there's like even a date on it at all?
No, the date on my exhibit sheet, the date that I used for that was the date that she sent it to me.
And then I'm not going to assume you know anything about probate court, but if there's an estate, typically there's a personal representative that administers the estate. And it looks like, at least based on this letter, an estate is entering a rental agreement with an individual, but the estate can't do that. The personal representative would have to. Did she give you a personal representative name or anything like that?
No, she didn't. It was all kind of confusing.
During the family team meeting, did you have any concerns about Ms. Smith's demeanor? Was it consistent with what you had become accustomed to in the last several months, or was it different? It
was different. Caitlin has always been very high. She's been always anxious. She talks very fast. She jumps from subject to subject. That's for the most part her norm, but that is also because of her untreated or unmanaged ADHD. The FTM though that we had, I mean, she was.
I'm going to object. This witness is not qualified as a medical expert, so the representation it's because of ADHD, I don't think there's a basis for it.
Well, I think she's testifying from her observations, but I mean, and I understand she's not a doctor. Did you want to lay a little more foundation or?
Not, I don't necessarily, not going to make a big deal about her baseline behaviors. I think we've all witnessed it. This court is very aware of it. What it's the reasoning behind it, I don't know that it's entirely relevant. So I'm happy to strike that from the record. But I think I just would really like to know from baseline, from what we've kind of observed throughout the last year in this case, and compared to what the family team meeting, how she presented then. I just was more wondering like what Ms. Smith had observed specifically.
I can disregard the bit about untreated ADHD. I agree we don't have a whole lot of information about that. So I'll sustain your objection on that point, but for her personal observations, I'm certainly able to listen to those.
So if you can sorry. So you kind of described her baseline behaviors, but if you can elaborate a little more about what you noticed at that family team meeting.
Her speech was very fast. She was very emotional. She couldn't sit still or sit in the camera view. It was almost like the camera was, you know, flipped, setting here, and she would pop in and out of the screen. I mean, she interrupted myself, my supervisor. I believe she interrupted Ms. Heiss a couple times. I mean, it was I don't say it was a heated FTM. I mean, we did, you know, I essentially gave her deadlines, you know, and I explained to her that we're 16 months into this case and, you know, we're still going for reunification and we can't do that anymore. So to an extent, I mean, it was expected for her to be upset. But I do believe that she was more unstable than she has been in the past.
Is she receiving one-on-one therapy?
Not mental health therapy. She, I believe, is required to see her substance abuse counselor, Tori, once a week at the Victory Clinic. But she wasn't attending the psychiatric appointments.
In the medical notes that you have, were there any concerns about mom's, I think, how do I remember this, mom's truthfulness and sincerity around actually having mental health treatment?
Yes. So as I tried to piece together the timeline of the med changes and why there was a change in medication, she had went to her primary care doctor, I believe on February 27th and then again on March 1st. And she was very persistent that her doctor prescribed her an ADHD medication, not necessarily Adderall, but something similar to that. Her doctor explained that they can't change or prescribe something different than a specialist, and said that she has to go through her psychiatrist. That was on the 27th, I believe. When she came back again on the 1st, she was again very persistent. And at that point, her doctor agreed to give her a 30-day refill of the Intuitive. Explained to her that it was only for 30 days and that she had to follow up with her psychiatrist. And then it's noted in there that Caitlin stated that she wasn't even sure she would take the medicine. She just needed to be on something while she go through the court case. So that is essentially when I pulled visits back to the office, because at 16 months into the case, and she's not taking her mental health seriously. She said that herself. And I did follow up on the March 26th with her psychiatrist, and she hasn't scheduled an appointment to follow up with her since.
Ms. Heiss's report, she indicated, that the child is very attuned to his schedule and routine. Have you been apprised of any behavioral changes that he experienced when these visits stopped?
Yes. So recently, I was just there for a home visit, I believe last week, if not 2 weeks ago. I had asked, they don't say the word mom because he does become very upset. He thinks that she's coming. It took a while because I was transporting for visits. So it took a while for me even to come to the house without him becoming upset because he would think that I was, taking him to go see mom. So that was a struggle for a while. And now he understands that, I come to the house just to see him. But recently, and they have a calendar in his room. He's very fixated on that calendar. He knows the day, he knows what to expect. It's very important to his routine. And it started, it was changed a lot because her visits, when they were taking place within the community before we were going to go to unsupervised, they were sporadic. She would visit on, a Saturday or a Sunday, different times, different length of time. There was, I think, a 3-week period that she didn't come at all. Now we're back to Wednesdays, and the relatives had said that, they found him, I believe, once, maybe twice on a Wednesday or around a time that he had asked about mom. He was kind of crouched down in the corner of his room. He has a picture of him and his mom, and he was crying and he was upset. And he doesn't understand essentially what's going on, where she's at, why he hasn't seen her. Behavior wise though, he hasn't become, aggressive or anything like that, but he understands that he's missing visits with mom.
And then I just want to touch base on Mr. Zavala Garcia. In your report, you have a copy of the letter that you provided him during this review period. And then you also have the chapters that you provided in a workbook. Did he happen to utilize the return stamped envelope to communicate with you at all? He
did not. Not that I've received as of last week, I believe. We checked the mail.
Have you had any communication with him one-on-one other than the letter you sent this review period?
No, I have not.
And you have no reason to believe that he's not participating or continuing to engage in any of the offered services?
No, I don't.
I know that we've kind of left this pending throughout the case, but the recommendation about introducing Mateo to his father, do you have any further information on that point or recommendations?
I think it was the last review period we did get. It was a very brief statement from Mateo's. He doesn't have a he has a case manager through CMH, Shannon, and she comes to the house monthly, but he's not necessarily in therapy per se. He's in ABA therapy, but not mental health therapy. So the recommendation, was from her that because of his age, in fact, he's never, met his father, how to explain this and have, phone calls or video chats. At that point, it wasn't recommended. I don't think at this point that has changed.
Your Honor, I have no further questions. If Ms. Smith would move to admit the court report and the attachments. Thank you.
No objection.
No position without my client, Your Honor.
I have no objection.
Thank you. They are received and they will become part of the court's file. Questions, Mr. McFarland?
I do. Have you been in communication with my client about today's hearing? Is she aware of it? That you are aware of?
She was aware of it, yes. And she received in the email that I had sent out with the court report and the exhibits, she was included in that, and I did put the Zoom information and the time on that.
I guess, did she communicate with you after that? Were we expecting her today?
She has refused to communicate with me, so no.
Okay. When you talk to her psychiatrist, my presumption is you have when you talk to her drug testers, my presumption is you had a release that allows you to do so, correct?
Yes and no. Their release, you have to specify exactly, the client has to specify exactly what they are able to release. So they were able to speak with me, they could not give me any specifics. Because of the release that they have on file does not specify that they can discuss drug screens.
You answered my questions. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Brooks?
Ms. Smith, I noticed somewhere in this report, I was looking for it while you were testifying, a reference to the fact that the mother's extended family, some of whom are one of them, has temporary custody of this boy, was getting a little tired of this and wanted it ended. Did I read that correctly?
I wouldn't say that. They're becoming very frustrated with Essentially, it's 16 months, down the road, and here we are still with reunification as the goal. It's very hard for them to maintain a structure and routine and to get Mateo to a point that he's at, and we're having a lot of setbacks with mom. So I believe that, they've been dealing with Caitlin for their whole life. So I think that has a lot, there was a lot of involvement that the family has had in all of this before the court got involved. So I think that they're just becoming frustrated with the process.
Mr. Garcia has expressed interest in having his family contact you. Now, they live in California. Would that be something that you would be willing to look into if they contacted you?
So I've already sent relative search and engagement letters to all of the identified relatives that he's provided me with, as well as himself, and I've received nothing back. I've also contacted them by the phone numbers provided, and they haven't reached out or responded.
How long ago was that?
The last reporting period. I believe that all of that was submitted for that report.
About 90 days ago.
Correct.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Ms. Heiss.
Thank you. In that family team meeting, do you think the mother's behavior was consistent with using opioids or cocaine that is in her history?
Once again, I would ask for a foundation to be laid that this worker has any medical expertise or what her expertise is in determining that.
I'm not asking anything near a medical opinion. I'm asking whether she, as a social worker, observed behavior that looked to her consistent with drug abuse.
I guess I'd want some type of foundation that she's been trained in observing what drug abuse looks like.
Would you like to ask her a few questions along those lines?
No, I'll just skip it.
All right.
Did you see pressured speech in that family team meeting?
Yes, I did.
Did you see jumping around in conversation?
Yes.
Did you see nervousness, anxiousness, and hyperactivity?
Yes.
Decreased concentration?
Yes.
So in your text messages back and forth with her, she has told you directly that she doesn't want to visit on Wednesdays and she doesn't want to talk to you anymore. Is that correct?
Correct.
Has she given you any evidence that she's employed on Wednesday or that she has any other conflict on Wednesday?
No.
And she indicates that she would have her lawyer contact you. Did anybody on behalf of her contact you?
No.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Any recross?
One question. What's your definition of pressured speech?
Objection, Your Honor. That's a medical term that's used in the records that we got today from the medical profession. So I don't know that she's able to define it as much as she was using it as a living term.
I don't know, Your Honor. Ms. Heiss asked, did you see pressured speech? She said yes. So I want to know what her definition is of the pressured speech that she saw. She answered yes, I saw pressured speech. What is that?
All right, I'm going to overrule the objection. I think she can do her best to tell us in her opinion what she believes is pressured speech.
In my definition, I guess pressured speech would be very quick paced, repetitive in certain words. There was no concentration. It was, she was nervous to be talking to, really. I mean, I think that everybody has seen her. I think that we've all observed her to have pressured speech.
Thank you for clarifying that. Nothing further.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. You may return to your seat. Any other witnesses today, Ms. Thomas?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. McFarland?
None, Your Honor.
Mr. Brooks?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Heiss?
I have no witnesses, thank you.
Comments?
Thank you, Judge. At this time, I believe that it is appropriate to ask the court to consider a goal change to adoption. We understand that Mr. Sala Garcia is doing his best to comply with all of the services that are being offered to him. Unfortunately, as we shift focus to the child does not know his biological father. They have not met yet, given his extreme, I guess, special needs that are really unique to this little one. I don't, as Ms. Smith stated, it's not really appropriate to have this introduction via Zoom with a stranger. And so given mom's regress in progress and the limited progress that was made beforehand, permanency is best achieved through adoption for this child. The relative placement has not benefited Ms. Smith to the extent that we would hope to continue to pursue reunification. This relative placement is willing to provide permanency to the child, and it sounds like they have set the foundation for this child to start to grow and thrive in a way that we were really concerned about at the beginning of this case. So for those reasons, we are asking for the goal change to the adoption, and for I don't have a compelling reason for you not to order us to file a termination petition at this time. And so if that is ordered, we will respect that order and would ask for a 90-day review today. Thank you.
Mr. McFarland?
Your Honor, I can tell the court that my client has a flurry of email activity to me within the last 2 weeks. I have played telephone tag with her. So I was expecting her to be here today, Your Honor. And I will leave it at that. I don't know what her position is because she's not here.
Mr. Brooks?
My client is currently incarcerated and will be for some period of time to come. So he's just not in a position to do anything. I have communicated to him my impressions of the quality of the efforts mother has demonstrated to this court. He, like me, is a little frustrated to hear what I had to say and has underlined what I questioned the caseworker about, whether the caseworker is aware that he has family members who may be interested in taking temporary custody or even guardianship of this boy. However, they are all in California. So he has a very clear picture of where we're at and where, probably most importantly, where the mother of his child is at this stage of the proceedings.
If I may add something, Your Honor?
Yes.
I did text my client asking her if she could. All right, it looks as though 2:13, I just got a response from her, and it doesn't indicate that she's going to join us. I have provided her with the Zoom information. So I want to let the court know I did hear an email response, but it was not in joining us. So.
Ms. Heiss?
I have no closing, thank you, Your Honor.
All right, well, the court finds all interested parties were given notice for purposes of today's review hearing and permanency planning hearing. We are at our 5th review. The child's been removed from his parent for 16 months. And had hoped that she would be able to join us today. We lost Mr. Zavala Garcia for a moment, but he's back, so I'm glad to see that. I did mute it already, but thank you for rejoining us for the findings. All right, so for purposes of today's hearing, the permanency planning must be adjusted and reviewed. It's very unfortunate that Ms. Caitlin Smith was not able to join us. Ms. Kristen Smith has certainly demonstrated that on behalf of Catholic Charities, the agency and the department, she is doing her best to offer reasonable efforts towards the goal of reunification. It does include those quarterly team meetings, those tough conversations and questions about services and verification of housing. When she pressed this parent, the mother in this case, unfortunately, that's part of what we need our good foster care caseworkers to do, is to really have a good hard look at a situation to determine what's in the best interest of the child, and finding the home not appropriate for visits, the fact that she was unemployed and had not been forthright about that, the fact that she has not been seeing her psychiatrist and wasn't forthright about that, the fact that she's not attending to her mental health needs is extremely concerning. I was reviewing one of our exhibits today, which indicate the problem list for this mother includes a hyperactivity disorder that we talked about a lot today, but also methadone maintenance therapy, sleep disturbances, mood disorders, cocaine use disorder and sustained remission, opioid use disorder, moderate and early remission, needing maintenance therapies, and a personality disorder. So she really needed to show us that she was serious about taking care of her mental health. There's a clear history here of usage of substances, perhaps, in order to try to alleviate some of the symptoms associated with those mental health problems. So unpacking all of that, it was extremely important for this child in order to be able to have a safe and healthy atmosphere. And then on top of that, she would have had to show us that she's really capable of handling a child with the heightened needs that this child has. She's been unable to do that. She's not here today, unfortunately, to give us any reason why. And unfortunately, I think that has a lot to do with maybe some of the things that we've talked about. Yes, Mr. McFarland?
My client just emailed me again, indicating she thought the hearing was on April 18th, Your Honor. So I just want to let the court know as she just responded.
Well, that's unfortunate. We did hear from Ms. Smith today. Ms. Caitlin Smith, Kristen Smith, I knew I was going to do that at some point, sorry. Our caseworker, that she did have an email last week reminding her of today's hearing, reminding her that of all the things that we were going to be talking about today with regard to the case services plan. And I can't help but suspect, frankly, that this is lip service yet again, because she's been unable to surmount many of the barriers that were identified at the outset of this case that continue to plague her at this current time. Mr. Zavala Garcia has unfortunately not been available. He's been, I'm sure, undertaking some services in the prison, but there's really no way for us to know whether or not he's been able to take advantage of those services. Our caseworker has done her best to communicate with him without any kind of response there. I would ask you to double down on your efforts to contact somebody at the correctional facility in the next report period in order to make sure that we can't verify anything that he's doing at the prison, because I know that'll be an issue when I look at what's going to be happening with this child in the future. And also to reconnect or attempt to reconnect with any of the relatives and to show us specifically what those efforts were and the contact information so that we can really satisfy Mr. Brooks's questions and Mr. Zavala Garcia's questions, frankly, on what's been happening with his family one more time before I make the final decision on what's going to happen with this child. So we'll ask you to tackle those things in the next report period, but I am going to change the goal to adoption. This child, again, has heightened needs. Some of those were discussed today by Ms. Thomas and our caseworker on the stand. That includes his need for routine, his need for treatment, special care appointments. There's a lot that he needs, and the first thing that he needs is stability and permanency. And his mother is not able to show us that. His father is not available to him, so it is in his best interest at this point to shift the goal to adoption. That is supported, of course, by the caseworker and our guardian ad litem. Reluctantly, I think all of us are looking at that at this point for this little one, but it is in his best interest, and that will be the order of court moving forward. He will remain in his placement with a relative in the next report period. That is the safest and least restrictive, considering the challenges that we've just outlined about mom, as well as the challenges that continue to present with Mr. Zavala Garcia. So he is in an environment that is meeting his needs satisfactorily, and he will stay there until our next juncture. I will direct the department to go ahead and file that petition for termination of parental rights, since we are at 16 months, and despite many of the advantages that a relative placement could have offered, we unfortunately have not had a parent to take advantage of that or to maintain her bond in a way that would allow me to consider an alternative goal to adoption. So our next review hearing will be scheduled for June, July, actually. So in the event that she's able to make some progress, it'll be June. In the event she's able to make some progress, I'm happy to look at that again. But let's go ahead and schedule this for Tuesday, June 11th at 1:30. Ms. Thomas, would you like me to reserve enough time in the event that you've been able to file and serve that termination petition, or would you prefer one more report period?
Judge, can I just want to clarify, are you looking at July 11th or June?
I'm sorry,
June 11th? Okay.
I can look at something later if you like. I've got Tuesday, June 18th.
Still 60 days.
July would be July 9th. So it would be just outside your 90 days. We give her some extra time, but it's also outside your 90-day time. Those are your options.
I don't have a problem with the June 18th date, if you guys want to address that.
Okay.
June 18th?
June 18th, and we'll schedule it at 1:30 so that we can accommodate Mr. Zavala Garcia from California.
Judge, I just have a couple of questions for clarification. Are reasonable efforts for reunification still going to be required?
I would like you to alter those if you could. Obviously, I fully support your position on visitation. You don't need to offer additional visitation to her if she's not going to show up and it's going to affect the child. So I can indicate in the order that visitation would be at the discretion of the department, if that helps.
At this time, the request, given even the further decline in the, I guess, and mom, the request would be to suspend it. I know that typically we don't really do that until we have that termination petition filed, but given the credibility issues that we're having and just the lack of cooperation that mom is getting with the agency, and then the child's heightened needs, I think that would support our basis for asking to suspend parenting time.
I mean, before the termination petition is filed, I would need to know whether or not there's a risk of harm associated with visitation. What is your position on that, Ms. Heiss?
Your Honor, it's been so unstable for the child, and he is unusually sensitive to the unstable. He would like to visit his mom, but the hit and miss is damaging to him. We have therapy in the house 4 days a week at 4 hours. You know, he's full-time in daycare school. He's got his other therapies going on. I think suspending visits until she requests it would be appropriate.
Is there a therapist that we could lay this at the foot of, or the feet of, I should say, such that in the event that she did reappear and wanted to exercise visitation, we could consult that person to see if there's a risk?
The child is, I think, as Ms. Smith had testified, there's a case manager that goes to the home. I don't know that that person has the credentials for an individual therapist. And then there's the ABA therapist, which is really focused on assisting the child in everyday life skills. So I don't know that we have anyone with hands or eyes on to provide that.
Gentlemen, anything you'd like to say on this point?
You know, I think they could secure one, would be a suggestion. Because I've been in active communication just during this hearing with my client, I would think that she's going to ask for parenting time as soon as she's denied that. So we're kind of triggering this. If she does get the help that she wants, or that she needs, I should say, that's required under the case service plan, just get her act together, so to say. I don't know that that what the risk of harm would be, Your Honor. If she can provide, according to the case service plan, proof that she's getting her psychiatric care, that she's not showing up positive with drugs. I've not heard any testimony that she showed up, that she's been denied parenting time because she appears to be high. She's been denied parenting time because of her mental health. If I heard something that stated that she was denied parenting time because of their concerns, then I think we'd have some reasonable risk of harm, and that wasn't presented. So I would say it'd be at the discretion of the agency.
Mr. Brooks?
I have no position, Your Honor.
Very well. Well, I have not heard definitively that we have a risk of harm associated with visitation, but I will say I can see that the bond that is deteriorating is affecting the mental health of the child. We've heard several different instances. Our caseworker testified to the effect that that's having on him, but that's in part because he's also not able to see her. So I'd like you to find a therapist that can help us answer this question. So what I'll do moving forward in light of what I've heard and how it's affecting him both because of the missed visits and the effect on his structure, I will place the visitation in the hands of a therapist, which means that he'll have to make a referral pretty quickly to get somebody on board to do that for this.
Yeah, Millibach is at this agency. She'd be really great for this case, I think. She has capacity.
Thank you, that would be great.
And in the meantime, supervise at the discretion of the agency.
It's supervised at the discretion of a therapist is what I have, which is the same as what we've been saying for Mr. Ruben Zavala Garcia. So we do need a therapist to weigh in on that piece as well. I think that could be potentially an issue moving forward. Unless we've had, I know you've had at least one review in front of the referee, but we would need a professional's opinion also on that, because we've had this father who's appearing here may have been available for visits, and I want to know if that's something that we should have been doing
before visits happen.
Right. It appears to have been the standing order for some time on visitation for Mr. Zavala Garcia. So that could end up being a concern as well. So we got lots of questions to answer by the time we come back in June. Other issues?
No, thank you so much.
All right, we'll have our next pregnancy planning hearing and review then on June 18th at 1:30 p.m. And if I receive the petition before that, then we'll try to see if we can't cover out some extra time for that.